Well, good morning, man, and it's a pleasure to be joining you both today for this recording session, looking at what we can do around suicide prevention with a context around those people who are in the Defence Force and the veterans and the families and friends associated with those people. So my name's Tynan, and I'm with Roses in the Ocean today, and I've got a lived experience of suicide. And since I've had that experience and I've been with Roses, I've been doing a variety of activities with Roses aimed at preventing suicide, and it's a pleasure to have you two joining me today. So I'll hand over to you, Adriel. Welcome.
Hi, Tynan. Hi, Michael. My name's Adriel. I'm from Townsville. It's a pleasure to be on this today. In even more so because I work with veterans. I'm passionate about the veteran community. I am a civilian, but got some great friends and family in the Defence Force, some from the British Army and others in first responders, so who often just swap uniforms. So I'm grateful to be here. My lived experience really is about supporting people who have gone through crisis. Not to say that I haven't been through stuff myself. A lot of that's because of the vicarious nature of helping people in absorbing and representing their grief or trauma. So I'm honoured by them sharing it with me, but it still can be a heavy weight. Yeah, that's me.
Thanks,
Adriel. Obviously, my name's Michael Burge. I did my 20 years, been out for 20 years, been working as a full-time mental health advocate, lived experience advocate. I had to identify to get my job as having a mental illness, had to go to the psych and get a thing saying I had a mental illness. You don't have to now, you just have to say it. But back then we had to prove it. So a lived experience of unfortunately wanting to take my life a few times, a couple of times in the military and a few times since I've been out of the military. The nature of my job helps and doesn't help that sometimes. I've helped hundreds and hundreds of people over the years with their recovery, and I'm what they call a lived experience peer worker, peer advocate, and been doing that for 25 years now. I started that in the mid-90s in the Defence Force. I didn't realise I was a peer worker then, but I was, because I was helping people do their pensions and welfare claims, and no one else was doing that. So I attend 2 veteran peer support meetings every week, because they're a bit cliquey and they keep away from each other, but I go to both of them. And and there's another youth one that I don't go to because I'm not young enough for that. That'll do for now.
You are young.
Look, thanks for the introductions, and look, it's a privilege to have you both on here. Look, Adriel, I'm going to start with you. You mentioned earlier that this conversation today is really pivotal, and it comes at a pivotal time as we approach the 26th of November and the start of the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicides. Now, we've got the terms of reference, and we've seen in that from publications that there's been some 3,000 submissions that have been made, and there's an expectation that there'll be more in there. We're not going to dive into the terms of reference as such, but let's stay with the men, the women who might be impacted by this process or have already been impacted. What are the pressure points that are coming for them in terms of like the whole charade around this, like the whole process?
Well, the first thing to say is the pressure points that currently exist. So literally this week is the annual Remembrance Day commemorations. So for many veterans and their families, there's a build-up of emotion before and after and during this week, as in Thursday, about what that represents. In previous months, there's been some 17 odd triggering media reports about things around the world or things at home that relate to veterans or past deployments that are distressing, not so much in content alone, but just on the fact that the way that they were reported or written as the media items. So what I'm getting at is there's already a layer of stress anyway, as I'm saying, plus summer, and plus the fact that a Royal Commission's been moved forward as it was supposed to sort of start in the new year. The part of that I'm saying is important is that one is it's a civilian legal cyclone, basically. It's something people don't understand in legal terms, whoever they are, how big this is and far-reaching it is. And the other 2 points is that we've discovered recently through some new statistical research that there actually are more veteran and defence people who have a lived experience than first thought, because some of the fallen brothers and sisters that they have in Australia that died of suicide there were more than first thought. So all of that layered together alone, plus summertime and the isolation of Christmas, means it's now more than ever that we have these conversations like we're doing today.
Thanks for the context. And to bring all that into some form of like the practical sense of it, with all of this being around at the moment and it's sort of being stirred up. Michael, I just want to come to you as someone who's been a mental health advocate and someone who's looked at peer support. Is there like a self-care toolkit as such that exists for these people? And if not, then what could it look like? How can we support people who in this process?
I've used more self-care toolkits than I can count, and I've forgotten how many that I can count. There's been so many, and I've had placements overseas and I've seen all sorts of versions of them. And but can I just get back to just elaborating on what Adriel said?
Definitely.
The triggers, you call them pressure points, the triggers are your meaning, I'm thinking. There's far too many to mention because they're different for everyone. Watching this play out on bloody TV, on the radio, listening to other veterans, reading about it in the papers, hearing about the numerous bad experiences everyone's having and still with their claims. I'm helping 3 people at the moment, one in Catherine, one in Harvey Bay, one in Sydney Crumbacilly at the moment, to try to get their claims through. And it's actually a huge trigger. And now this on top of it, it's they're having suicidal ideations. But there's a number of and retelling, listening to all the stories get retold over and over and over again has been one of the biggest triggers I've had in my role, because people have a gutful of having to retell their story. And a lot of them feel like doing what I did once, and that's record yourself for 40 minutes and say, go and watch this, then come back and we'll start the conversation, because I'm not repeating all that again, because it's just going to trigger me. So here it is. I recorded myself and said, here it is. Go. That's my life experience and how I ended up with PTSD, anxiety, suicidal ideations and everything. And then we can talk from there, because I'm not repeating that. And a lot of us have been using that method because we don't want to repeat ourselves over and over again every time you meet someone new. But anyway, getting back to...
That's a great technique, Michael.
I
haven't thought of that.
Yeah, well, I first thought of it when they wanted me to... I also present on recovery, and I was doing it at the local uni. And I thought, I'm sick of repeating this every month to third-year students. I said, I'm going to fall asleep. And they said, well, why don't we video you? Trouble is the auditorium was empty and I had to pretend there was an audience. But that was 15 years ago, and I probably wouldn't say the same things now. But that's different again. But that's what gave me the idea. So you just can all watch this every month. And if you want to ask me anything, I'll come out. Instead of me saying the same thing for an hour and a half every month about recovery and what it is and what it isn't. Yeah. But getting back to...
we might just stay with that whole bit about the submissions just for a moment, since you brought it up. And it's a great topic. Is there any tips that you could provide, either yourself or Adriel, for people who might want to put a submission in terms of what they need to put in there, how they can do it, and how they can protect themselves through the process? Because as you've mentioned, when you share a story over and over again, it does stir things up in you. So if people are going to do that, and if start writing a submission is something that they really want to do and something that'll be part of their process, their life process, and decide, hey, you know what, I need to have my say. How can they do that, and how can they do it in a way that will keep them safe?
Well, sorry, Adriel, I'll just continue. I use the same little method I thought of again. So one of our vets peer support groups, the other one doesn't want to do it. We're going to do a little video, and one guy's going to video what we want to say. And we're all there to support them. And if they get choked up or anything about talking about it, we just stop it. And they can amend it. And they're very good at all that sort of stuff because they were IT and in the Navy. where I worked in electronic warfare. So they're really good at doing all that stuff. So we're actually submitting a burnt DVD when we're finished, and we don't know how long it's going to be. It could be 25 minutes, it could be an hour, but you know, when you say something, it's usually a lot shorter on a DVD or a video than you think it is. So we're doing it like that. We started writing down stuff, and we all found that it was actually overwhelming for us.
Yeah.
We tried to find time sitting down at night in front of the TV doing it. No, that was too stressful. That was causing me not to have sleep or anything. We found in a group when we're brainstorming with each other, and then we'll say, do you want to put that on video? And then we'll turn it to you. And then you have a go at putting what you just tried to tell us all on video and putting that all together. We've found that to be a more therapeutic way, because we're all there for each other. And
that's brilliant.
Someone gets upset or starts crying, or which they do. We're all there to support each other. We're not doing this in isolation at home.
No.
It's bloody very overwhelming. It can take you months to write a submission yourself.
Yeah.
But when you've got a group of people, you're bouncing off of each other, and rather than putting it down in paper, we're doing it on video.
That's brilliant, Michael. I because it's just like you're chatting to your mates, basically.
Exactly.
And then unpacking certain threads of conversation in a safe place, basically.
We've only had to hand a tissue to one person in front of the camera. We said we'd get rid of that.
but I've actually heard that, and you probably could tell me, Michael, that putting in a video submission is there for evidence. It's evidence like you would in a court. So it's no less official because it's on a video.
Well, they can see the emotion and the feelings and the passion and the anger and all those feelings you have mixed up. There's heaps of them. They can see that in your voice and feel it in your voice firsthand. You can't, it's very hard to project that on a piece of paper. It's a lot more difficult.
Well, one thing that I have found, and I don't know whether this is widespread at all, is that some veterans, you know, because they went in the services at 16 and a half or 17 or whatever, they're not crash hot on their writing skills. That's no one's fault. It's just the way it is. But they feel, okay, well, there you go. So one of them said to me, I prefer to keep silent and not say anything on text if I was to get my spelling wrong. And I suppose he was saying embarrass himself, but what he was saying is it's too important to get wrong, and I think I'm going to get it wrong, so I'll say silent. And I thought that was a bit, I'm thinking, is there some other alternatives? And you just given me one then.
Well, I've learned it from social media, unfortunately. I'm not a big fan of it. Things get taken out of context when you write something on Facebook, when you write it on a text, when you write it in an email. And I'm going through that with my friend now, who saved my other mate, Digger, who was shot in East Timor in 2000. A lot of people think a lot of stuff didn't happen there. It's just that it wasn't talked about. Anyway, he was shot, and I ended up helping him get TPI at the age of 25. His mate, who lives in Catherine and who just got nominated for Northern Territory Australian of the Year.
Oh, I saw a photo of that.
You
That's
did?
him.
Yeah, Paul.
Okay.
He's a really good mate. We were only on the phone last night, and I won't get into all the support I've had to give him. He's done nothing for 20 years, and he's been trying to get DVA to recognise this for 2 years, when his mate beside him, who got shot and nearly killed, and all the bullet holes through their webbing and everything, instantly got all that. 20 years later, I'm helping him fight to get recognised, when he was the one that run back to 1RAR to get them to come down to help them. So I won't get into that. He told his story on ABC and all that stuff. And so I'm sorry, I think I went off the track.
No. What you were basically saying was that because he said his little piece, other people might be encouraged to say the same. I think that's what
and it was easier to do it like that than try to put it in writing, because it's so hard to, it's more powerful when someone watches something and goes, holy shit. That wouldn't have seemed the same if he had written everything they just talked about on the video. That wouldn't have had such a big impact on us. but listening to them and seeing their feelings and their emotions and their mates hanging around and being there for them, will get me choked up in a sec. It does make a big difference.
Yeah.
And so with that being a method that you've used, it sounds really effective to have that peer support group and to really have that encouragement with someone to share their story and have that the other people who have experienced similar things. It sounds like there's a lot of people who won't want to have their submissions. How can we encourage people to do that, to come together or to do that? Is it something that people need to be encouraged, or is it something that they should want to do themselves?
A bit of both, I suppose, but there's a lot of layers under all of this that are never talked about. And one of them is, I suppose I classify myself as lucky because I was in between Vietnam and Afghanistan, but I got out in 2002 just before we went. Oh, sorry, Iraq. But at least I did Bougainville, East Timor, and a few other deployments I'm allowed to talk about. But a lot of my instructors, friends and that did 40 years, didn't do 5 minutes overseas. And every time Anzac Day, you reminded me of it before, Adriel, every time Anzac Day and Remembrance Day and anything comes along every year, a lot of them end up in the mental health service where I work, or in units wanting to take their life because of their feelings of worthlessness, because they feel worthless because they didn't go anywhere. And people, and I'm not having to go at any, I don't know how long you're in, Adrian. Some people have been in 5 years, have got a chest full of medals and been all over to Iraq and Afghanistan a couple of times. They were in 40 years. They trained us all. They didn't get 5 minutes there. They've got a couple of medals and they feel ashamed and embarrassed to go on an Anzac Day parade because of that. And they sit at home welling on this stuff. And actually a few of them are in mental health facilities now with Remembrance Day coming up because they still feel unworthy. And I'm not taking away what everyone's done in their service over the last 20 years. Thank you for your service. Don't forget about these poor buggers that were left behind that trained all of you people, and you wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for them, that weren't fortunate enough, and I'll say lucky enough, to serve anywhere, and the effect that's had on them. And the service that we do here in Australia, and some of them, 20 years sitting inside a barracks or 40 years and training your guts out and never going anywhere and never using those skills and putting up with all the crap that we put up with day in and day out. A lot of my friends say that it was much easier serving, and they feel sorry for those people, and they're just not acknowledged. I just wanted to put that there.
Yep. Honestly, this is what I'm seeing too, Michael. Honestly, and this is one of the focuses where sometimes, just because of those different layers in the groups and different experiences, was sort of like, sometimes we literally use the term ex-ADF on purpose to try and encompass more people in a conversation at times, because whether it's just one day of service, whether that's on the barracks only, they have some sort of story to tell. Now, the fact that they don't have either the interest or the feeling that they should be at any ceremonial activities still means that they've got a story to tell, or still means that they should be recognised in some other way. You know what I mean? Like this, one thing for me, I've said to some that didn't deploy, and even some that worked in the public service part of defence as a civvy, but they knew all that happened over in deployment because they read all about it or saw it online, is you've got a story to tell. You need to write it, you need to journal it or blog it or something, just to have it down, and we'll work it out. We'll sort it all out later, what it means later. And
as you know, some of the crap that happened to us in peacetime when we were training, including a lot of people dying in training accidents and stuff, was shocking. And the cover-ups and and all that sort of stuff, and not acknowledging, and these poor buggers have got it even harder than a veteran that's just come back from Afghanistan or Iraq to get anything accepted, because they haven't got the war service. And you probably both know, because I used to practice this, there's two different statement of principles to prove that you've got a causal factor that does something, and there's something called reasonable hypothesis and balance of probabilities. And if you've got war service, I'll say it, Blake, just slowly, it's a lot easier to get something accepted than it is if you haven't got any war service. And that's not fair on them too. That just puts an added layer of bullshit on them, bureaucracy, that inhibits them from getting recognised for the tough times they had while they were in peacetime out here. But where I was going with that, Adriel and Tynan, I told you I'd go off the track, was trying to encourage them guys just to come to our vets meeting. Oh shit, it's like pulling teeth out of a rhino. I know a lot of them because I've grown up here, and there's probably about 30 that I'd love to come, and I continually hound them, and I have for the last 10, 12 years. Some of them have come along, and then they hear about everyone talking about their experiences in other places, and it just makes them feel worse, so they go. And others have been able to get past that and come along and stay there because of the mateship and everything, and because of how they're made feel. And someone at the head of the table. So we don't care if you did 1 minute or 50 years. We don't care.
They need to hear someone say that. That's what I'm saying. They need to hear someone actually say that.
You're part of the brotherhood, and
But you know, for some of them, as soon as that comment's made from someone with the authority, as in another veteran or another ex-ADF person saying it, that validation is like the healing just switches on. Like it's like a switch. Yeah. I've seen it happen in a room. I'm sure you have.
Yeah, especially when I had one mate just to the last Anzac Day, and he had 6 tours of Afghanistan, and Billy, his name is, and he said in the meeting with him, and I said, do you mind just, there's a few of them around here that are feeling like I've just described without repeating it. He said, look, guys, the tours I did were hard. They were tough. They damaged me mentally. But, the time I spent in Australia in my 42 years of service, he did 42 years, retired as a warrant officer still. He said, I found it a lot easier over there than I did here. Use guys with that Parramatta ribbon, the one older ones of us. He said, when I see that, he said, I have so much respect for you guys, and much more than I do sometimes for the modern day soldier, because they don't know what you've put up with and what you've been through. They don't understand. And that was just so powerful. A couple of them started crying almost. It was just so powerful.
I saw this in, well, we won't go into the detail of it, but we just know, everyone knows intrinsically the different experience that Vietnam veterans had. And likewise, what we're saying, I've actually come across ex-ADF Vietnam era personnel that miss getting deployed, so they feel like they've missed out as well in a weird way from being part of that. So they're sort of left out of being left out. It's it's in that song, You're Only 19. Like it's right in the words. Even Townsville's mentioned in there, and you think, well, who was marching along our strand in Townsville, but who also was watching, that wanted to be marching? You know what I mean? Like that sort of those thoughts that have been running for 40 years, as you mentioned. Where do they go?
Yeah. Before I forget it, sorry to chop you off. It's just something that flashed into my mind. Maybe there could be, they're going to be asking a lot of questions about how DVA. I'm on that site listening to everyone whinge about DVA and what they can and can't get and whatever. But maybe there should be some section in this Royal Commission that targets the people we were just talking about. And we want to hear from you, and not just all the decorated veterans. We want to hear from you and what you've been through, because that's just as important as hearing about the others.
So on that,
sorry, go Tim.
On that topic, like Adriel, I know we've spoken around mental health advocates, that there's a lot of mental health advocates within the veterans, within the Defence Force, and it sounds, Michael, like once an advocate has people in the room together, and they basically give them permission and say, okay, you can talk about this, like welcome and validate them as a person. Is that something that needs to be done? Is it something that formally there could be some sort of training for the mental health advocates to say, okay, let's encourage people to come together who aren't speaking, because is there evidence that shows that by giving the veterans an opportunity to speak and have that submission, is that going to be something that's going to help in their healing process and ultimately reduce the rates of suicide?
Can I just add one? So can I just add one nuance there before you, Michael? Sorry, is that one thing I have noticed with young veterans that were raised in the digital age is in fact they don't want to speak; they want to text. It's the opposite. So yes, they might want to be in the room and be validated, but in their case, they might want to be on a blog, a consistent blog that they're typing in their answers and communicating online, because they're digital natives. That's what they feel comfortable and safe with. They've never learned how to have a face-to-face conversation, sadly. So I just wanted to add that, because a lot of young veterans say this to me, like, I don't want to be in a room. I don't want to be around even my friends and talk. I only text them even on the same room. So sorry, Michael, I just want to add that. It's a generational thing.
Yeah, and because I'm fairly well known at the national level and stuff, a friend that owns a company called Connectica was given the funding from Morrison to go around Australia and do focus groups with veterans everywhere. We did the first one in Toowoomba, so I was very proud of that. I brought all the veterans I could. There was 4 or 5 of them out of the 16 that had never been anywhere. One was my boss who trained me, and he's unfortunately going through some tough times now. Never got anywhere, never did anything. And we were going around the table, and then there was one that had the 6 tours of Afghanistan and whatever else. And when it got to him, he just broke down and cried, and everyone's going, what's wrong? And he told it in his own words about how ashamed and how unworthy he felt sitting at that table. And you had to be there. And the lady that run this focus group, I can give you her name. She's got the outcomes of that meeting. And she said, out of all the meetings they did right around Australia, that was the most emotional and heartfelt meeting they did. Because I felt for him, because he's been a good friend of mine. It wasn't for him. He trained me. So, I think the other veterans around the table admitted that they didn't even think about that. They didn't give it a second thought. Some of them might, but the ones sitting around the table said, we had no idea you weren't turning up to Anzac Day every year. We were wondering why. We thought you might have lived in a different town or something.
Yeah.
And we had no idea that it had anything to do with how you felt unworthy and didn't want to go into the RSL with hundreds of soldiers standing around with medals flashing all over their chest. You'd done 42 years and you got the Defence Force Service Medal with a few class and that other red thing. It
goes to, I hear this, particularly a North Queensland thing, like that sort of, so-and-so and so-and-so, male or female, have been holding up the bar for 25 years together every single week, but don't actually know each other. They never actually talk. It's just
so where I was going with that, Tynan, sorry, it's going to be shitting hard to get them people to come out and say anything in this Royal Commission unless they target them in some way and say, we don't want to hear about the people that have had zillions of deployments. We want to hear about the people that were left behind and supported everyone to do a great job overseas, and how that had an impact on you and how that's still having an impact on you. Maybe, I don't know.
So with that being the case, and I guess if these people are going to stay somewhat in the shadows, then if they're not going to come out and they're not going to be vocal about it, it also probably means that there's a likelihood that they're going to miss out on the support that is available for them because, like you said, they don't feel worthy of that. So what can we offer them in terms of self-care? Like you mentioned that there's been a lot around there, but in a practical sense, what does that look like for these people who might see your message here? What could you say to them in terms of self-care? Like what can they actually do for themselves if they've been in the shadows and they feel like they're not validated to be part of that society? What would your message be for them?
Well, I can only speak for myself around Toowoomba because I've run hundreds of courses. I've done 110 mental health first aid courses, because we're trainers in the army and you get used to doing that stuff. And I'm a self-taught mental health advocate with all that stuff. I run lots of what we call wellness recovery action plan courses. And I know they call them that all over the world, but I don't call them that. And so we sit down and I invite all, and I know who to invite, and I know who to knock on the door of, and I know how to get hold of them somehow and get them. And I've run about 9 courses in the last 15 years, once every couple of years with them. And we'll sit down and we'll talk about developing a wellness toolkit, the self-care toolkit, whatever you want to call it, bananas and pajamas. There's so many different names for that kit, that self-care stuff. And we'll sit down and I'll facilitate it, and I'll give them a book that I buy from America. There's a veterans one, there's one for anxiety, there's a wellness thing for this, there's hundreds of them everywhere. And I'll give them one and I'll say, this is your book to keep. So in this day, we're going to take our time, we're going to bond with each other, and we're going to start off, and this is all about self-care, and some of them bring their families along. You own this book, you don't have to share with anyone. And we go through and we start off with, let's develop a list of things that are going to help you stay well, help you to return to wellness, and sometime a resource you can refer to when you start going downhill. And as a matter of fact, in all the groups I have, I say to everyone, I want you to have a self-care plan so that when you start going downhill, your significant others, family, friends, veterans, can assist you and can do what you want them to do and not what the local mental health service want to do to you. We want to do this with you. And that's the difference between peer support. We do it with you. We don't do it to you. And we involve you in every aspect of how to develop that plan. And I facilitate that during the day. And we'll go through and say, we're going to start off what you like when you're well. You can share if you don't want to share. You just write it down. This is yours to keep. I don't ever want to see it. You can show it to me if you want it, but I don't want to see it. Then we'll go on to about what's your pressure points, as you call them, what's your triggers, the things to be aware of, and then we'll brainstorm them and how I help them with that, because sometimes it's hard to think of that stuff. Every slide I'll put up, I'll have 100 triggers, and I'll say, just give it a bit of time, or I'll give them a handout and say, here's a highlighter, go through and highlight the things that you can identify with. And if there's something on there that triggers you and it's not on that list, write that in your thing. And then we'll move on to, now that's come up with an action plan for those triggers. Now let's go to early warning signs, and I'll do exactly the same thing. Send out a page full of 100 warning signs, and we'll talk about this. And now, would anyone like to share how they make sure that once they've identified this trigger and this early warning sign that they're starting to go downhill, how do they nip that in the bud before you have to get taken by the police or the ambulance to the mental health service, or you're doing something terrible? And then we'll go on about signs that the things are breaking down. When things are breaking down, action plan, sign that others need to take over from you, and the type of help you want and don't want from others. And I could list 100 things under each one of them, but at the end of the day, they own this because they write in there what they want, and they use that as a resource. And I say, refer to it every now and then. When you forget, when you start feeling like crap, like I have a few times, I've had 3 mates in the last 2 weeks pass away, one on Sunday, and only 57 of a heart attack. And I said, when you start getting triggered and start feeling like that, you just can't think of simple things like, why don't I just go for a walk with the dog? Why don't I jump on my Harley? Why don't I go for a swim? That all goes out the freaking door. All you want to do is just curl up in bed. And
it's the irony of the first thing that we enjoy the most, the thing we like, old mate with the fishing, it's the first thing we stop doing. Like that whole irony of that. You think, well, the first thing I enjoy, actually stop doing that.
Well, I bought a Harley 10 years ago, and I've only done 3,500 kilometres on it. And it was my wellness tool. And
can I borrow it, please?
Yeah. I'll admit, Adriel and Tynan, and I say to people when I do this, I'm a fucking hypocrite. I'll repeat that. I'm a bloody hypocrite, in case you want to cut it out. I'm a bloody hypocrite. I know what I got to do, and I'm telling everyone else to do it on my courses, but it's bloody hard to do. And you need a really strong support network and people next to you that can help you do that. And I mentioned the other night, Tynan, or whenever we were talking about a thing I brought in called a buddy protocol, and I made it up about 20-something years ago. And I even wrote, I don't even think I could find it. I probably could. And I said, every one of our groups, we're going to identify 2 other people in our group, one place in the workplace, maybe someone at home and everything. And you say to them, I'm giving you permission to come up to me and say, Michael, are you okay? You look a little bit withdrawn. You seem to be isolating. You seem to be getting a little bit aggressive. In that last meeting, you were talking so fast, we'd have to record you and slow you down twice. You're jumping around all over the place like a manic chipmunk. And then instead of getting wrapped up around the axles and saying, I'll say, really? And then I'll start listening to them and they'll say, remember, we've got this agreement between each other, so you don't get shitty with me.
But it's already pre-organised. So
yes,
some of that tension goes away because everyone knows what everyone's doing.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that. We one of the things we're doing at Oasis, which hasn't gone to that level, which it needs to. I love the word protocol because people know what this protocols work when people are stressed. They just have to follow the steps, so to speak, from whatever side. But we've done a thing, and we're going to relaunch it again for summer, called Check Your Mates, and it's just a basic thing of we were frustrated with what do people do after are you okay? What if someone says I'm not okay? Yeah, okay, there's stuff online, but in the veteran space, that doesn't really help. There's no next step as such on in the national conversation or just on a local conversation. So we said, check your mates, check 5 of them, and then get one of them to check on their 5, and away you go, sort of thing. And what we were up, it wasn't like that, pretty basic. But what we were trying to say is that you are the connection, like you're the person that has the trust of that other veteran. In this case, the listed buddy protocol member. So they're gonna listen to you about it. It's not going to listen to a mental health clinician or a celebrity or a politician. They're going to listen to you, and you are going to be the trust mantle for someone else, and away you go. That's how it spreads. Reaches who it needs to reach.
And a lot of the time it works really well. But it was funny. It was about 2 months ago. Only about 13 turned up instead of 20 something, and Bobby's an old crusty old RSM from Okie, and it was in Vietnam, and he said, are your buddies here? And his big curly mustache, bald head. And I said, no. And he said, we need to have a word outside. And I went, oh, what have I been doing? And I said, look, guys, we're all friends here. Just tell me, am I a little bit hyper today? Because I was feeling it. They said, yes. They said, you have been absolutely going off. And I went, I sort of felt it. I sort of felt a little bit like I was having an adrenaline rush and, and ready to blow my stack, but I thought I was keeping it under control. And they said, no, you're not doing a very good job of that. And I said, shit.
So in a similar way, I was talking to a couple from an RSL sub-branch in the Whitsundays, and one of them is 30 odd years in the RAF, and the other one's 30 odd years in the Navy. Now, because being a couple, they learnt each other's culture, the 2 service cultures as they moved around. And because of that, how do I put it? Because it's a RAF person understands Navy culture and vice versa, people find a safe space within them. We're talking about those ex-ADF that didn't deploy. They felt safe talking to that other person because it didn't feel like they were talking up or down in a brass sense, in a hierarchy sense. Just someone who understood what they were talking about, was a buddy by accident, I suppose, understood the culture and the language and all the little terminologies and little rituals without any of the pressure. I thought this is a pure buddy. They're like neutral, Anyway, it's what I saw, and it worked. So I saw these RAFies going to this Navy guy for support, and then these Navy people going to this RAF lady for support. I'm like, oh, it must work.
Yeah. And they're so powerful, those groups, but not all of them click. Like I said to you before, we've got 2 different clicky ones that won't go near each other. But about 4 or 5 of us go to both, and we don't want to play that bullshit game. But you know, a little bit like the RSL sub branches in Toowoomba, we must have about 20. Instead of all just combining and making one decent one, they've got 20 little ones, and we look like crap on Anzac Day. You know, so but you can't. You know, that sort of stuff used to happen in the military, didn't it? You'd have all the different trades that'd stand around in a mess with each other, or stand around in a little group with each other and stick to your clicky groups.
I just reflect on someone else that we got involved here. We a guy called Dylan. He does the Brothers in Books, that online sort of book club type of thing, and he's doing conversations through Instagram of all places, and he's got the largest veteran social media following in all of Australia at the moment. But what I'm getting at is that he's just talking about this particular veteran author that's wrote the story, or about how they succeeded in business or fishing or Olympics or whatever. But as he's doing that, that safe space just sort of builds around that without even trying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's different ways of doing it.
You'll have to pass that on to me at another time, all these details, so I can link in.
It's just come out of nowhere, and it's working because, as I said, them young fellas they're digital natives. You know, that they don't do face to face.
Because some of those sites that I'm following, I get more depressed after I've been on them for a while, and I don't go back on them. They're just so negative. They're just so bloody negative and so anti everything. You know, it's been some
really good discussion around practical tips, but I kind of feel that there's a subset of people who perhaps might be missing, and we've spoken a lot about people connecting together, but what about people who are living in isolation and don't want to connect together? What can we do to encourage those people to effectively the steps to process towards the help seek, or to actually identify that, okay, I might need to get some help? What can we do to encourage them to take those steps? And I guess using the stages of change model, like from that pre-contemplation to contemplation to action, what can we do to move those people along the line?
Well, if I jump in there to say that, you know, you're right. There's some that are isolated and want to be isolated, you know, and so, yeah, you might randomly see them and be able to influence them, but, you know, bumping into them at Coles, but rarely, or they might even not really be listening or hearing what you're saying and talking to them. I think the main thing I want to impart, so long as they come across this information, I'm sure, Michael, you do this in other ways as well, is it's the self part of self-care, like what they can actually do for themselves in the moment, wherever they are. So for me, an example of that, and I've modified it slightly because of Northern Australia and the weather and a few other things, and having worked with veterans and average Australian people or other people with other traumas, is, you know, I said about check your mates 5 people, but for me, it's really about 5 key things or emotions. And so I'd say, you know, halt. Are you, first of all, checking with yourself in the mirror or wherever it is, are you actually hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? You might find the problem is not there once you resolve 1 or 2 of those things. It's not actually there. It's no reason to get into crisis about. It's a perception. Because of the service and other things, particularly the weather, particularly that happens in the south with the mood of Hobart veterans or the burning heat up here, is are you hydrated enough? Angry, lonely, or tired? And the last one thing that veterans always say to me is that I don't have PTSD. I do have anxiety. And why they're saying that is that I was actually trained to be anxious. I was trained to be alert. I don't have anxiety. And so, okay, well, let's unpack that. And so what I say to them is then checking yourself. Am I hypervigilant, angry, lonely, or tired? As in, is this a trained response, or am I being responsive to a pressure point or a trigger? Which one is it? Sometimes it's just a trained response. There's nothing actually wrong. Other times it's misinterpreted at that and not dealt with for years and years, because it actually is, however small, a form formulation of anxiety or post-trauma stress response. But no one really knows because we haven't really asked the question of ourselves first. Am I hypervigilant? Am I hydrated? Am I just hungry? I can do that to myself in the mirror without anyone else helping me. That's what I'm getting at.
That's good, Adriel. I mean, yeah, what you were saying about spot on about living in isolation. I got a lot of friends that's how they want to live. And the only time they come out of the house is to come to our meeting. We have two different ones, Wednesday and Fridays, is come on either one of them, and that's it. And then they say they go back home, shrivel up, they get their groceries delivered. They don't want to know the rest of the world. They don't have a TV. And I thought, holy shit, I'm glad I couldn't live like that, but some of them just want to be like that. One of the things I thought of doing years ago, and I was on a national committee, and Jeff Kennett ended up doing it with the Beyond Blue bus, travelling all around Australia. I don't know how successful that bloody thing was, but I suggested a number of years ago where we do some sort of little thing like that, a huge Winnebago with something to do with veterans and ex-military on it, and visit all the towns around Australia, or each state does it, or each region does it, southern, central, whatever, with come along and talk to us about what you think you can't access wherever you are. There's a lot of people. We've got a place called Tara here where I run my mental health first aid course. I can't even use my phone. So everything that I access online when I'm doing the course, I have to convert it to WAV file because otherwise I can't run the course there. So there's a lot of people like still in places where, you know, they reckon we're going to have coverage everywhere. That's bullshit. And when you get it, it's terrible. So I might have went off the track then again. Yeah. So
you're just talking about, I talk about as veterans that live in areas that are actually remote or difficult on purpose. You know what I mean? Like there's veterans up here that they're from Victoria or wherever, and they're up in, you know, Cape York or wherever, hiding away because they want peace and quiet.
Yeah.
They're literally in a place that doesn't have any internet, and they like it that way.
Yeah.
But they still want some social contact. They do.
Yeah, they want contact and can't get it. And we have the same thing in mental health. We're trying to get people in rural and remote areas assistance when no one wants to be a clinician in the middle of frigging nowhere. So they're having these things where they're linking into psychologists and psychiatrists and everything, and it's covered by Medicare 100% and don't cost them a cent. Not that it costs us anything for mental health anymore, thank God, but they can do this video link stuff. The first time they do it is next to a doctor in a town and then get a referral, and then after that, you're just...
Well, it reminds me of the Royal Flying Doctors. In some parts, they do a thing called a pit stop. They're actually just testing for diabetes and blood pressure. But just like the power of, you know, Orange Sky Laundry while the washing is being done, it's the talk for 20 minutes while it's happening that's the power bit. It's not actually about the clothes. And really, at the end of the day, in a mental health sense, it's got nothing really to do with blood pressure or diabetes. It's just the talk, the safe space of people, particularly blokes and women, being together on a topic, on a particular task, but happen to find a modicum of healing along the way.
And it's very hard. It's very hard to do surveys too. I survey 32 different units over 90,000 square kilometres for my mental health service. I've done it for 15 years, and it's not frigging easy because some of them are really hard to get to. And a lot of the time, the questions I ask them, and I say, "What is it that you want? What would work for you?" And then collate all that and bring it back. But that's not easy in itself. You got to get to those people first to find out, and then.
Just to finish off it's the trust mantle. So the successes you've had, Michael, and your friends, is because you are trusted, and therefore, with those listening skills, able to translate whatever it is, whether it is through SurveyMonkey or you're just literally taking notes. It's because you're trusted, therefore it's opened the doors. Whereas next person or some graduate with no cultural knowledge about the situation, closed doors, no surprise.
Yeah, and what I've tried to do too, make that more successful, and I'll brag about it, for the last couple of years, I've got the most surveys anyone's ever got in Queensland in any mental health service ever. And I can't believe that happened in COVID. All of my surveys are done face-to-face, none over the phone, none over the computer, none over nothing. And I say that to them, I'll come anywhere where you are to sit with a group, to sit with an individual, to talk about what you think could improve the way people are treated and cared for. And that seems to have worked for me.
I'd summarize it in saying that the special nature of it is because you listened to them, you didn't just hear them.
Yeah.
And on that listening and that understanding of people, you've both spoken about some good examples, like Michael with the buddy protocol and Adriel, check your mates, and about allowing people to go through the process and identify what's going to trigger them when they need assistance. But let's talk about the other side of that. So let's say that we're around someone who's in the defense or someone who's been a veteran, whether or not they're our brother, our sister, mother, dad, grandfather, whatever, grandmother. And we've noticed that something has happened in someone's life and we're concerned about them. How can we approach that person and check in on them in a way that's not going to push them away? And where I'm coming from that is, as someone with a lived experience of a non-fatal attempt at suicide, I find some people in my life, if I kick my toe, they will like be on me. Hey, are you like suicidal? Are you going to suicide now? And I'm like, I've just kicked my toe. And how can we approach people in a way that isn't going to push them away and still make them feel loved, but without, I guess, do you understand what I'm sort of saying? Like, how do we approach people?
There's a lot of considerations, and we could talk about them for the next 10 years. And when I do some of my courses, is about approaching people, and it's about, try to get it off the top of my head, about finding the best time and place you can do that without having a spotlight on them from every direction that, shit, he's got problems. Blue Care's just pulled up out the front of the house, wherever they are. So, oh shit, that person in that house must have problems. You do it in the most subtle, gentle way possible, so that no one else, as well as them, are not aware that you're going to do that. You just all of a sudden just pluck out of nowhere saying, oh, geez, we haven't caught up for a while. Do you want to catch up for a coffee? We're having this sort of thing. Oh, I haven't got time for that. I got some things on my mind, and I know you're the only one that can help me. I've used that one a lot. I've turned it around and said, I need your help when I'm really going around there to help them.
Oh, absolutely.
And they don't know it for a little while. So I don't bullshit about what I'm needing help for.
No.
But I might flare it up a little. And then all of a sudden I'll say, oh, and how are you going, by the way? And then the smart ones will go, is that the real reason you're coming? But the other one, but there's so many different strategies. Yeah, you go, Adriel.
No, I'm laughing because it's sort of what I do. One thing I intrinsically know is that veterans and their families and their children and some of their grandchildren, they intrinsically know what it is to serve. So if you're asking them how they are, in some ways it's not an empowering question. They feel powerless. But if you ask them to help someone, they'll do that in a heartbeat, and they'll help as such, but along the way, they'll get what they need as well. What I'm basically let the helper help, and they'll heal themselves, basically. Many of them chose to serve because they are people who, as their value set and their passion is to serve. That's why in Townsville, 40% of the police are veterans, because they just swap uniforms and keep going. The other points I wanted to make, so that's the first one, that the helper help. The other one is that, am I purpose? And it goes to what you were saying, Michael, about who is on the buddy list protocols and who is not. Am I the right person to be helping that person? Or actually, am I the person that knows who the right person is to help that person? And it's up to me to follow that up and make those loops come together. just thinking, oh, well, someone else will do it. The last two is that, in fact, I will follow up. I can't do it. I'm not free now, but I will follow up. I will turn up at 6 p.m. And veterans know what it is to keep time and keep to task. And the last one is proximity, in the sense of sometimes a veteran's child or grandchild or spouse may not want to talk to them about these topics because it's too close to home, because they don't want to tell that person something that's going on, or vice versa, from a civilian to a veteran, because they know it'll hurt them to hear it. So part of building up this buddy protocols, or I check your mate's network, is having safe others that or parts of that conversation you'll be handed to. Because, you know, I might not choose to tell my family what I'm going through, but I might tell Tynan. You know what I mean? Yeah. So let those, like you said, Michael, let those early pre-conversations when things are going well happen. So when it starts to hit the fan, we all know what our role is.
And as a peer support worker, because I was one of the authors of Peer Work in Australia, going back to that, are you feeling okay thing? And that's a thing, you know, you only learn with experience. Probably what I should say first up is having a lived experience is not enough to be a peer support worker or a person that's employed on, I'm not having a go at them, by the way. If a person got employed in open arms as a peer support worker because they had a lived experience of being a veteran and all that stuff, we learned it years ago about out of the 120 peer workers that have worked with me over the last 20 years, only 15 of them cut the mustard. The other 105 had the best intentions, had their heart in the right place, wanted to do that, loved the job, but they actually were causing more harm than they were doing any good. And
one thing I'd say with that, though, just to side a butt in, but is that I've noticed over time there's like a circle of support that people need to map, and it must be going through your well-being self-care planning stuff you talk about, in the sense that, you know, this bloke will have the hard conversation, and he intrinsically would be a good peer supporter. This bloke's only ever going to do the fishing trip, and that's okay, as long as we know that bloke's job is to take the fishing trip. And
the levels.
Those people.
Oh, the levels. Yeah, we have their levels and the senior level like I am. We have the person that'll play games and read the newspaper and take them for a walk.
But what I'm saying is that
the next level where someone talks about wellness and goes through a wellness plan with them and helps them identify their early warning signs, and then someone else that'll connect them into other. We have people at all levels. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is that even in the civilian in Service Street, we don't understand that it doesn't have to be. It's not black and white. It's not I am a peer support worker, I'm not. There's different levels, and you choose or you are accepted at certain levels to be in that circle. It's an individual thing, and it can be mapped. It's not like you're in or you're out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is what I meant about that fit for purpose thing. Like I always say to myself, because of where I'm at as a supporter, or even if it's today, if my answer to one of those things is not great, well, I better go and have something to eat before I go and help someone. Otherwise, I'm going to make them upset as well.
I'll leave the lived experience part about that. You're feeling all right thing, or are you okay? I'm not a big fan of that, because in my service, you go up to someone and say, are they okay? They're liable to punch you in the face. And you got best intentions, and it was a great idea and it works for some people. But you say that to some people too often, they start, some people are a little bit paranoid, start thinking that they're not okay. And why does everyone keep asking me that? Maybe there is something wrong with me. Are you feeling all right? I wish one more person asked me that. I'm going to go to the psychiatrist and get an assessment, because there must be something wrong with me. There's too many people asking me that. You know, there's the right place and the right time. And it's not what you're asking. And I think I was getting into this with Tynan the other night. It's not what you ask, it's how you ask it.
Correct.
Whether it's in a genuine and meaningful way that people know you really, really care, and you're not just going through the motions because you read it in a textbook, or they taught you at uni, or that's what your boss said you had to say, or that's what the steps were in the 15-step stages of bloody asking someone if they're okay. I don't think that exists. I just made that up, you know. So I'm going to go through this like a bloody robot and not really mix it with your main, everyday conversation and language and everything. And the person just goes, this person's just going through the motions. They don't really give a shit. They're just asking all these questions because they've been taught that they have to ask them. And as soon as they know that you're not real and genuine, you lose them. You lose that connection. You lose that rapport. The other thing was, I used to like using it, and I used to say to some of the peer workers, the broken can help the broken. And sometimes they can do that better than anyone else because we have that lived experience, and you can connect with people more than some professionals, and professionals hate me saying this, and some of them have got a lived experience too, but they won't come out of the closet because they reckon it'll affect their job. But it's just a fact of life. Sometimes the broken can help the broken more than a professional. But what you need is a bit of both. A bit of both is better than having one or the other.
And what impact does that have, and has that had on veterans accessing support? And like, from the people you've dealt with, how has that played out in reality? Like, how has that played out in real life?
I told you the other night, Tynan, and I told them, if you want to pay me and give me a job, Veteran Affairs, I started being used. I don't like using the word mediator. So what I said was, a couple of veteran friends of mine, including that one I was talking about before, was yelling down the throat of them, and they were getting angry. And then I said to them, no, give me permission to talk to them. And they said, I'm not talking to them again until like that. I said, how about I get on the conversation? And I'm there as sort of a mediator. I wanted to use another word, support person, whatever. And so you both give me the permission to say, stop for a second. I need to translate what the DVA person said into our language for my mate. And I need to stop him and let you know what he's trying to get across, because he's in a state of hyper arousal and he's lost it and he's gone off the track. And that's worked really well with them. And they've used me probably several times over the last couple of months to do that. And I said, I don't mind doing that with friends. I said, maybe there's positions in Veteran Affairs somewhere that someone can act as a bit of a go-between. And but what worked for me is I knew the veteran and I had a rapport with them. I just didn't, but that could still work with people trained in the right way and practiced.
Yeah, so we've conceptualized this up in the Oasis in Townsville as, we literally call them navigators. So they do a bit of that translation because they themselves have similar service history, or they are a peer supporter anyway. Most of them are volunteers, but their task is to navigate, thus translate, not necessarily to advocate, like not to talk over the top of anyone. Just simply, I don't mean that in the sense of the official word advocate. I'm just talking about in the sense of talking for someone rather than just translating, just being a translator and a navigator of a journey of getting from this part of wellness to getting that part of wellness. This might involve getting a job, or starting a business, or getting a physical health assessment, or whatever it is. All the stuff that you do, Michael, every day that you can't quite describe because it's so holistic,
And a big part of that, obviously, and amongst all of that, is obvious, is the trying to keep everything de-escalated so it doesn't get to a point where they both want to hang up on each other, or they say you're being too rude, I'm not going to put up with any more of this shit.
That's right, exactly. And there's a fine line to keep that to go. Very fine line.
Yeah.
Now, we're almost to the place to wrap up. So, Michael, I'm going to throw to you first for a message for veterans out there, or people who are currently serving the Defence Force. In the scheme of what we've just been discussing about, what would your message be? Have you got a message for them?
Don't suffer in silence like I did, and many others have and still do. If you're not feeling real flash hot, that light bulb moment should go off in your head, and it's ongoing and persistent, and it's stopping you from doing the things that you enjoy or interfering with your activities of everyday living, whatever that is, then a light bulb moment should go off that maybe you need to go and seek some professional help to get those things addressed. Because the longer you suffer in silence, it's actually not only just destroying your quality of life, but it's actually shortening your lifespan, because your immune system is fighting hard to deal with all these feelings of all the different numerous feelings we've all got with different experiences, that it's not doing its job. What it's supposed to be doing is preventing us from getting early onset of dementia or cancer or heart disease and stroke. So my message is, don't suffer in silence. Go and get some help and live a much better quality of life and a much longer life.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And Adriel, same question to you. So what would your message be?
For me, there's three key words, in particular with the topic of what we're talking about today and what life is going to be like between now and Anzac Day 2022 in particular, is just as Michael said, I would say also, to add to that, one would be body. Listen to your body. There are some people that have great mental stamina, and that's because their personality or their training. But they have some chronic illnesses before time. They're holding the stress in their body. You know what I mean? And sometimes that's exercise that needs to be done, or it's nutrition, or whatever it might be that keeps your body healthy. Some people hold their stress in their body. They might not have a mental health crisis, but they might have a heart attack. And we see that in carers, that they're fine, but they seem to have physical elements along the way, much more than the person that they're actually physically caring for. The second one is the system. Because of what's happened in veteran and serving people's history since they were a young person when they entered, is that what we're talking about in the Royal Commission is the system and what happened or should have happened. What we can do from what things that Michael's talked about and other great veteran movements or veteran families movements around Australia that are doing some positive things is then what we do. Once it's fixed, what do we do then? And what I've found is that it's up to us to write that history, or sorry, I should say, write that future. So what do you want to do? How you want to empower yourself? The last one is purpose. Even this goes for the person sitting on their own in isolation because they want to be on their own, is that the key thing with suicide prevention is that the massive red flag that I've learned is people having a sense of being burdensomeness to other people. I'm a burden, better off without me. Also, on the flip side, what is my purpose, or what is my new purpose now that I've lost the one that I had on the barracks or base or in the submarine? And if purpose is found, a new purpose, an added purpose, or at least some chance to talk about what you did, you'll find that there's a life worth living as well. Sometimes with our lived experience in the most hardest and darkest of places, we suddenly find that purpose. So those are my key words: your body, your system, and what it is thereafter if we fix it or dismantle it or whatever we do. And the last one is purpose. I mean, my colleague here, Lieutenant General John Caligari, retired, would say, he has this quote he says from the 1500s. So, someone to love. People need someone to love, purpose to live, and something to look forward to. And that's what will keep them well. So I couldn't disagree with that.
Well, thank you both very much. And Mike, have you got some final? Go.
Oh, just a quickie. I didn't say about that living in isolation. If they can't come to us, then we've got to find a way of getting to them.
Literally. Literally stop telling people to reach out, start reaching in.
Yeah. That's all.
No, it's perfect. It's important.
Look, it's a great way to wrap up this conversation, and both of your messages have been powerful. And Michael, like you've just said, like, don't suffer in silence. And where you've just left that, like, we need to reach them. It creates an opportunity for a further conversation and further discussions around this. But look, I really appreciate both of you for sharing the insight that you've got, plus also being vulnerable and sharing like your own personal experiences on such an amazing topic to be discussed about, and something that we shouldn't stop talking about. We need to talk more about it. And the work that you're both doing, I seriously am in awe of both of you. So thank you so much for your time and all your efforts today. And yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Can I just add one thing? Even if people watching this, after this week online, it's on here. I'll put it on my arm to remember it. It says "Pause to Remember," which is part of what is on the I assume is on the wall behind Michael at the moment with the poppy.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that yes, okay, 11/11 is when that happens. Oh, that's great. That's a great mural.
Yeah, it's lovely. I put it on a thing there. It's just a sort of like a tablecloth, and it's beautiful.
Beautiful. What I was trying to say to some people, particularly other civilians I talk to, so you can pause to remember any day of the week, honestly. And also, as you said, Michael, let's pause to remember different types of services, even if it didn't leave on deployment. And yeah, like you said on your shirt, let's think about remembering tomorrow.
Yeah. That's it. I won't get up and do what they do in the middle of a ring.
Well, it's been a pleasure, guys.